Good morning, everyone. The webinar will begin in just a few minutes. While waiting, I do encourage you to download the handout available to you under the Handouts tab on the control panel. While we wait, we do have Deborah Easton on the line with us. Deb, good morning. And
Good morning.
just a quick question. Today, we're going to be discussing generations in the workplace. Has there been much research available on how each generation has handled the pandemic?
Well, there are certainly many opinion pieces out there, many blogs, quite a few posts on social media, but the actual studies, the ones I was able to find, are fairly small in scope. I usually wait for the Pew Research Group, who has actual divisions within their research organization specifically for different generations. And they look at all kinds of information about the generations, like are they returning to work? And if they don't, will that affect the economy in some ways? What are they looking for in a return to work position if they were completely laid off from the position they had prior to this? So it's out there, but I would have to say it's probably in its infancy.
Okay, yeah, and then, yeah, I assume as things get back to somewhat normal, there'll be a lot more research coming out.
Yeah, I think so, and some of it I think will provide a good contrast between what is anticipated to be happening right now and what it will look like when people return to work, whatever that looks like, versus what people are actually experiencing. So I think there's still a lot of organizations struggling with who are we bringing back on site, who can stay remote, what does that look like? So I think there's still so much being worked out just in the work site itself that we may need just a little while to then survey, all right, what's working for you and what isn't working for you. So that way we can give better suggestions to people.
Right.
Yeah. I know that you from Kent State, you all are trying to sort out who can be working from home on any given day and who needs to be in the office, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
right?
Yeah. They put out a policy uh, based on size of department, all kinds of different factors that are going into that. And yeah, I think a lot of departments are still trying to sort that out to decide who can work remotely and who needs to be in the office. So yeah, it's a learning process. So.
Yeah. And I think as long as everybody's in that learning process, it's going to be difficult for the research to come out and say, okay, this is our best recommendation for a post-pandemic workplace.
Right.
So I'll be
Okay.
interested to hear if any of the participants have questions and comments about that during the webinar. So.
All right. Yeah, definitely. We definitely encourage those. Excuse me. Speaking of that, we are right at time. So good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Strategies for Leading the Multi-Generational Team. Since we want to continue to deliver these informational webinars for you and continue to practice social distancing, we are delivering this webinar remotely. Your presenter, Deborah Easton, will be presenting from her office and me from mine. My name is Patrick Allen. I'm the program manager for Kent State Center for Corporate and Professional Development's public open enrollment programs. Our center specializes in providing employee development for partnering organizations in Northeast Ohio and around the world. We offer training as both public open enrollment programs, currently being delivered live and virtually via Zoom, and some in-person programs that are starting to come back. But we can also customize programs and deliver them live and virtual or at your location. I am joined today by Kent State facilitator Deborah Easton. I will be serving as your host, and Deborah will be our presenter for today. Kent State facilitator Deborah Easton has been a communication coach for over 30 years and provides audiences with practical and effective advice for communicating with colleagues, customers, and direct reports. Her techniques for one-to-one interactions and group communications provide participants with practical strategies for handling difficult exchanges. She adapts every program to the needs of unique organizational cultures and the individual learner. She has partnered with Kent State's Center for Corporate and Professional Development to provide a broad range of communication skills programs for organizations of all sizes and industries. Her most requested training topics include interpersonal communication skills, coaching accountability, dealing with difficult behaviors, and today's topic, strategies for leading the multi-generational team. Prior to her work in facilitating professional development for adults, Deb taught communication courses in Kent State University's Department of Communication Studies, where she supervised 40 instructors of the Speech Fundamentals program. She also taught in Kent State's Graduate School of Management and holds a master's degree in speech communication from Kent State University. Everyone in attendance today has been muted to avoid background noise for any of the nearly 100 registered participants. We do encourage you to ask questions at any point during the hour. You can submit your questions to me in writing using the questions tab on the control panel on the right side of your screen. I will present your questions to Deb as time permits throughout the hour. Again, there is a handout available to you that summarizes today's presentation. It's located under the Handouts tab on the control panel. We encourage you to download it and take notes on it during today's presentation. We are recording today's webinar, and you will receive an email next week with a link to a recording after we conclude our time together. And now I'd like to introduce Deborah Easton.
Thank you, Patrick. And I guess it's pretty obvious from that intro which generation I fall into when they're talking about how many years of facilitating training. So I guess you have that part figured out already. So this topic of strategies for leading the multi-generational team has many facets to it. And the one facet that we're going to focus on today is what's happening in this post-pandemic workplace. I'd like to start, however, by just a reminder about where generational research comes from, so we are all on the same page. My biggest concern when facilitating this topic is that to make sure that we don't actually extend and make worse stereotypes about each generation. The information about generations comes from research on experiences that we shared during our formative years. So that would be, as we were growing up, it would be when we first entered the workforce, our experiences that have formed us throughout our career, those shared experiences. And of course, for any one of us, even though we might be sitting side by side with somebody who was born on the very same day we were, we may have still experienced our generation differently because we are diverse, unique human beings. And of course, we have to think about all of the diverse characteristics of us as people. Where did you grow up? How many people were in your family? What was the socioeconomic situation for you, not just in your family, but when you enter the workforce? So it's important to consider that we are unique individuals, and this information is based on a lot of research over a long time, almost 20 some years now, of generational research of people in the workforce and how the workforce has changed. Certainly the pandemic itself will have impact on people differently. Even school children, if you think about, there's a difference between the juniors and seniors, that all of a sudden school shut down and there was no prom and there was no graduation, and a first grader who the following September entered school, but entered school from home. So be thinking about what some of these experiences are, and just even within an age group, how that can be different. Most importantly, when we talk about generational research, it shouldn't be used to talk about which of us is right and which of us is wrong. It's all about simply understanding trends in how we think and where did that mindset come from. So now that we have that background, let's take a look at what the generations are that we will be talking about. And what you're going to see on my slide here is that I oftentimes represent the different generations with a telephone. And you'll see as we get to post 1980 just how important that representation is, because it describes how the farther down the list we go here, the shorter duration the generations, or perhaps we should just refer to them now as cohorts, are. Even 5 to 7 years now, because things change so rapidly, can make a huge difference in people's mindsets. So the first generation that you see I pulled up here is the traditional rotary dial telephone that some of you may have only seen in antique shops. But this traditionalist category, people born between 1922 and 1945, you may look at that and say, I don't think I work with anybody in this category. Although, as I look at the list of people who have signed up for the program today, I know that there are several of you in healthcare, and certainly your patients fall into this category. So for others, you may be saying, why are we even talking about it? Because there are remnants of this generation's mindset in many industries, in government agencies, for example, in family-owned businesses where the originator of the company was in this generation. Even though the company's leadership has turned over to the next generation or the grandchild's generation, there may still be aspects of how the original traditionalist formed the company in the company's culture. Why? Well, maybe because it's out of respect for the originator of the company. So it's something that we need to actually continue to take a look at, because some of the traditionalist mindset is having some impact on policies and procedures about work from home in particular. So that's why we're still going to spend a little time talking about it. Then we have the fabulous baby boomer category, if we do say so ourselves, and we do often. We have been the largest generation on the planet for quite some time, although now we are becoming outnumbered by millennials and Gen Z. But we as a generation, you can see they're represented by the push button phone, which we thought was just fabulous when it first came out. One thing to keep in mind about us is that we are the generation who defines ourselves by our career more than any other generation. You meet us at a party, and the first question we will ask you is, what do you do? You meet other generations at that same party, and the first question they will ask you is, seen any good movies lately? So do you have a family? We baby boomers identify ourselves by what we do for a living. And it's one of the reasons why in 2011, when the eldest baby boomers turned 65, many did not retire. Part of it was the downturn in the economy, but a lot of it was, I identify myself by what I do, so I'm not going anywhere. Now, that may or may not have changed because of the pandemic. We'll talk about that. But that failure to leave the workforce has been kind of annoying to the next generation, which is Gen X. Gen X, born between 1965 and 1979, and who used the first portable phones, which were huge with an antenna that came out about 2 feet, and you had to carry the thing around in a bag. But Gen Xers have been waiting for a very long time for baby boomers to get the heck out of their way. And the reason for that is because Gen X is a distinctly unique generation. Unique generation because of what was going on during their time frame. Gen X, if you think about it, many were latchkey kids, came home from school, let themselves in, locked the door behind them, and then had a list of assignments to complete before anybody else got home. Gen X, however, is the smallest population, outnumbered on both sides by baby boomers and millennials. So, and part of the reason for that is because women had entered the workforce and were delaying having children, and part of it is the divorce rate tripled during this particular period in history, 1965 to 1979. And by history, I mean the United States. We're talking about research based on the United States. So once Gen X begins to really take over, and they really are, they're kind of the forgotten generation, but are mostly in management and leadership roles right now. Gen X is unique because there's this next category of Gen Y, or sometimes called Zennials, spelled with an X because there is considerable research coming in that this category between 1980 and 1985 is actually a transition between Gen X and Millennials. Take a look at the phone, the first flip phone, right? There wasn't a whole lot you could do on that, not as much as you can on a smartphone. But there are people who believe that many people in this category identify more as Gen Xers than they do actually in the millennial category. So it's kind of interesting every time I facilitate this topic, asking people in this category if they're willing to identify themselves. Where do you identify? And many say, I think I'm more Gen X, but I do see there's a bit of millennial in me, because yes, I did have a smartphone as quickly as I possibly could get one. And think about that. When the smartphone came out, we gave them to kids, not because we thought they were spoiled, but because we wanted to know that they were safe. And if something happened that wasn't safe, they had a means by which they could get help. So there's a difference there in what people can certainly do on that smartphone. And now you take a look at Gen Z and you notice the Apple Watch. And I have a question mark there about 2010 because researchers really can't seem to make up their minds when Gen Z ends. Because as I mentioned before, there's a difference between being a junior and senior in high school and starting school during this pandemic. There are even articles I've seen where they're talking about the next generation, maybe referred to as Gen C, Generation COVID. I don't know whether I would want to be identified that way, but who knows? We'll see how that goes. So part of this is how old were you when this major historical event occurred, and what impact did that have on you? Are you Gen Z, or will you be whatever we will refer to the next cohort group? So these are the categories that we'll be taking a look at. Those of you in the Zennial or the Gen Y category, we're going to take a look at Gen X and then Millennials. And if you want to ask a question about that as we go through, please do so. But at this point, what I'd like to do is ask you a couple of polling questions. So I'm hoping you're right there and at the computer and can therefore answer these polling questions. So Patrick, if you would please open those polling questions.
Okay, we're going to launch the first one. So according to several generational studies, which generation adapted most readily to work from home during the pandemic? Let's give you a few more seconds as I see people are still voting. Okay, well, looks like everybody has voted.
Okay.
Wow, with 69% millennials, 23% Gen X,
Mm-hmm.
8% Gen Z, and 0% baby boomers.
Okay. And the answer actually is Gen X. All right, and I know that pretty much surprises people, but that's what the answer is, and you'll see why here in just a little bit. All right, so second question, polling question is, go ahead, Patrick, if you would please open that.
Okay, according to several generational studies, which generation was the least satisfied with the organization's work from home policies? Okay, a few more seconds. Okay, I'm going to close it. share the results. Um, Again, leading the list with 46% millennials. Now baby boomers are in at 38%, Gen X at 15%, and Gen Y with 0.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so the actual answer there, least satisfied, were millennials, right? So you got that one right. Okay, now you might have been surprised that the answer to the first question was Gen X. Okay, now we need to think about the dates of the millennials. So I'm going to go back here just a real quick. Take a look at the dates of millennial and do the math. The eldest millennials are 35. If you include zennials in that category, the eldest are 41. And so these are people who were trying to work from home and had their kids at home at the same time. And so what that means is, while millennials have always wanted to work from home, they certainly didn't anticipate that they would also be teaching kids at the same time. So this is why the answer to these two polling questions might have been a surprise to you, because, well, it was Gen X who managed it better, and it was millennials who were the least satisfied. All right, well, having said all of that, then let's take a look at each of these generations and understand them a little bit better. And at the same time, while we understand their characteristics, talk a little bit about their post-pandemic workplace impact. Okay, so the traditionalists, born between 1922 and 1945. This is the World War II greatest generation. And as this generation, even the younger members of the generation were affected by it, even if they weren't old enough to have participated in World War II. They thought, if a military structure saved the world, then why not put that in place in business? And so that's what they did. So one of the characteristics that you find about traditionalists is that hierarchy and rank and structure are very, very important to this category. Seniority was the basis for promotion, not competency. This is why sometimes when you're dealing with people with traditionalist mindset and a millennial or even a Gen Z now are promoted into a supervisory position, you may get pushback from this generation because their thought is, you've only been on the planet for 5 minutes. What makes you think you can manage other people? And that's unfortunate because they're thinking in the seniority category, not in the competency category in terms of their criteria for promotion. So this hierarchy and rank is something that is interesting in the post-pandemic workplace, because one of the things that we're seeing with this is how technology decisions were made. For example, it's very typical when you're dealing with a traditionalist mindset that the most upgraded and updated technology is given to the people with the highest rank, not necessarily, the people who need that updated technology. I remember when cell phones first came out. Okay, yes, I'm that old. But I remember when they were being given to people in companies, but they were still very traditionalist minded. So they gave the cell phones to upper management, and the salespeople who were out there in the field were saying, we're the ones who could have used this. Why aren't you giving it to us? And even though that was a couple of decades ago, you still see this kind of thing, especially during the pandemic. I've heard from several places where the thought was, oh no, our most updated laptops are staying in the building. They're going to stay locked in the building. You're going to have to use whatever you have at home because we're not giving you the most upgraded technology to take home and play games on it with the kids. I mean, it was that kind of mindset that you sometimes saw with technology decisions. There was a state of work 2021 study done by Adobe that found that 33% of tech employees or people who used a lot of tech left their job because of outdated technology. They're trying to work from home, and yet they were handed a computer and they were told, okay, we're going to do some Zoom training, but we're giving you a computer that doesn't have a workable camera. And there's all kinds of evidence that shows that when people have their cameras on during a Zoom training, they're much more engaged. The entire group is much more engaged when they can see each other. So this is something to think about with this hierarchy and rank. Who gets to do what and where and with what kind of resources? Second characteristic is that this category had a complete and total separate work life and personal life. You rarely talked about your personal life at work. Maybe the company would make some kind of acknowledgement of your birthday. Everybody would sign a card that didn't have any rude humor on it about your age. And at the end of the day, they would hand you the card, but that was about it. And so this work being separate from personal life affected some decisions about return to work. First of all, many companies said, oh no, all leaders still need to be in the office. Okay, but but why? Simply because of status, or because they were actually needed there to oversee the on-site people that we had working? I mean, was that based on status, or what was that based on? But leaders were to be visible. And so to have them be working from home in a traditionalist mindset just doesn't make any sense. And then, of course, we have the blanket policies that we're beginning to see in the return to work. Blanket policies. Oh no, we want everybody there, want everybody back. And it's not necessarily working for everyone. There are many people who can support the fact that they were actually more productive at home because maybe they were of a generation who didn't have kids running around, or that they were assisting in teaching. I mean, they really felt like the lack of interruptions made it possible for them to be much more productive. So these blanket policies, certainly we have to think about, are you a customer facing position? And is the customer actually there in front of you in person? Then yes, we need some people in there. But this is a traditionalist mindset. And where does it come from? As long as we put the policy out for everybody, it's consistent, and we don't have to deal with the chaos of flexibility. That's one of the greatest fears of the traditionalist generation, is chaos, okay? So if you want to convince a traditionalist to make a change, you must talk logically and about bottom line productivity and how it affects work. If people are talking about what's going on with them at home, for someone with a traditionalist mindset, they hear that as whining, right? They don't hear that as a work impact argument. And so this is some of the mistakes I think that people are making. They're not thinking about how to present this to a traditionally minded person, that working from home is actually better for the company. Okay. So these are some of the things that you may be running into with traditionalists. What questions might be out there about traditionalists?
Yeah, actually, Deb, a couple of questions did come in. How do you convince people who must work on site that people who are working from home are being productive?
Okay, part of what we need to do is make that visible. All of a sudden, all of these office people disappeared from the manufacturing facility, for example. And so the people who were still going in and were getting adjusted to the new work environment and to wearing masks and thinking, am I risking my health? I mean, there were so many concerns in the very beginning. Couldn't help but think, we are doing so much more for this effort than any other employee is because they're at home and in comfortable work environments, not wearing shoes. And so one of the things we have to do is make this visible. We need to you know announce to the people who are working on site what these other departments who are no longer visible to them, what are they doing? What are they accomplishing? How many sales calls have salespeople made while they were working from home? And maybe even compare that to the number of sales calls they were able to make when they worked on site. Because many salespeople will say, without the interruptions at home, I was actually able to do more. And so I think making visible what other people are doing, the goals that they have accomplished, is very important. Okay. Any other questions that came out?
Yeah, it's kind of almost the flip side of that first question. How do you convince people who work on site that their job performance is not being judged more harshly than people who are working from home?
Okay, yeah, that's the other thing is that the perception is, face time management. You can see me, therefore you can see any little mistake that I make, but you can't necessarily see what people working from home are doing. And that's not necessarily true. And it's not that we want to publicize, oh no, they're screwing up too. Okay. That's not what we want to say. But how are you managing by objectives? What is the matrix that you're using? What is the form that you're using for that entire team to hold each other accountable and show that they are doing what they need to be doing? And this has nothing to do with what the on-site people are doing, but they're scorekeeping. And so they need to see how others are being managed. Otherwise, when there is return to on-site, if there is, you're going to begin to see some interpersonal conflicts. So there needs to be more discussion, and not just discussion from the manufacturing floor supervisor, this is what I've been told. No, have the sales staff come in and say, this is what we're trying to do. What ideas do you all have for how we can handle the supply chain challenges that we have right now, and really get the two groups interacting, even if it's via Zoom. Okay, any other questions there, Patrick?
Nope, not at this time.
Okay, all right, so then let's see what baby boomers had to say. Okay, baby boomers, born between 1946 and 1964. 18-year population explosion, a baby boomer born every 8 seconds. Baby boomers are the change generation. And it may surprise some of you to hear me say that, because you may be seeing baby boomers who are resisting change right now. But think about how many changes baby boomers have been through in our lifetime. We started out being told that we can do anything. We'll have a man on the moon by the end of the decade, and we did. And we were going to change society for the better. We got into the workforce and did everything we could to change the hierarchy of traditionalists. And then the 80s came along, and we watched Dallas and Dynasty, and they told us to be very visible, and how you look, your image really matters. And so our hair got bigger, our shoulders got bigger, and it was all about that visibility. So when the layoffs of the 90s happened in so many industries, baby boomers had a mindset of, okay, the 80s told us to be visible. So here's what I'm going to do to protect myself from the next round of layoffs. I'm going to stay at work, putting in 50, 60, 70-hour work weeks. If I'm here, they will know I am dedicated. And that sacrifice of personal life and even marriages and family time for the sake of the career is a huge mindset for baby boomers. We tried all kinds of things in the 90s to protect ourselves from the next round of layoff. All kinds of flavor of the month. Let's try this. That didn't work. After 6 weeks, throw it out. Let's try something else. So now you may be dealing with baby boomers who have been through so many changes that you oftentimes hear, listen, kid, we tried that once before. It didn't work then. I don't want to go through that mess all over again. And this is why sometimes it feels like you are dealing with perhaps a generation of people who are pushing back. It's just that after going through all of this, we don't want to relive some of the problems all over again. We have been dedicated to our career, but then the pandemic came along, all right? And the question became, will this be forced retirement? And I'll tell you from a personal point of view here, as soon as March 10th, 2020 occurred, all I was doing was initialing canceled training contracts and wondering, now what do I do? After all these years, do I retire at this point? Or do I have the energy to transform myself all over again? Well, then Kent State stepped in and they said, we're going to transition all of our in-person training over to Zoom. And my thought as a baby boomer was, seriously, I'm going to learn another technology. Do these people not know that I started with a Commodore 64? Okay, I'm tired of that too. So you have a lot of people in this category who had to make a lot of decisions at that time. Some baby boomers may not return to the workforce because financially speaking, they're okay. And they're finally saying, I've dedicated enough to the career. It's time for me to dedicate some time to myself. Others are staying, but actually, interestingly enough, many have adapted pretty well to work from home and are saying, you know what? That lack of having to deal with the commute every day and traffic, and I've gotten the hang of Zoom, and I'm okay with that. So many baby boomers do not want to return either to the job or to the office. But that means that there has been a silver tsunami, they call it, an exodus of a lot of experience and a lot of talent based on that experience. And so what's happening to your organization as a result of that? Many boomers will return at least part-time to work as mentors. And this is a major advantage because Gen Z, our youngest generation entering the workforce, actually want to have apprenticeships, not just internships where they have you stapling papers together, but actual apprenticeships. And for those of you in manufacturing, this is something to think about. Can some of your retired baby boomers or soon to retire baby boomers, can you have them reach out to high schools or to vocational schools or tech schools and work as a liaison between your company and some of those soon to graduate welders, for example? Be that mentor there so that your company is the one that those welders will want to come work for. It's a lot more effective than simply putting a sign out in the front yard saying welders needed. So think about this. How can we utilize some of the boomers who are hesitant to return but have all of that knowledge? And then secondly, some of the challenges of the baby boomer generation is that baby boomers have always been about FaceTime management, having people in their seats so we can see what they're doing. Because think about it, that's the definition I gave you. It's been visibility, be there. People will know you are dedicated. That's led to management style. So many times, baby boomers uh, are having difficulty with the work from home. And they're thinking that this is just a way in which we are coddling the younger generation because they've always wanted to work from home. And that can be a mindset that you may have to overcome with many baby boomer managers, is that, there are other ways that you can manage by objectives as opposed to FaceTime. The other mindset of baby boomers has always been this collaboration or inclusion of all. The civil rights movement, the women's movement, has always been about that mindset of inclusion of all. And so for many baby boomers, that's what they're missing about about working from home, is that feeling of being with people. But once we've shown them that, hey, you can have a breakout session on a Zoom, in a Zoom meeting, and people can still have small groups, and we get back together and collaborate. This is something that we oftentimes have to convince baby boomers of, show them how this works. Okay, because remember, being seen was always important to the career. That's how you were promoted. That's how you had job security for many baby boomers. So what thoughts about baby boomers come to mind?
Excuse me, Deb. There was one question that came in. What type of training do you recommend for managers who are struggling with remote management because their focus has always been with face-to-face management?
Okay, all right. First thing is, it's kind of a twofold. One is to train them on some of the latest technologies. Think about it. Many people, they get their phone and they learn how to use the apps on the phone that are applicable to them, but none of us, or at least few of us, learn all the applications that are possible, all the things we can do with our phone, with our computer. And so it's the same kind of thing with there's a lot of systems out there for baby boomers, not just learning how to do Zoom, but use all the features of Zoom. But there's also other software out there that helps baby boomers learn how to manage by objectives, how they can show the entire team what everybody is doing, that the collaboration is there, the accountability is there. And we will need to talk to them about this. Doesn't mean I'm micromanaging. It just means that I'm making it all visible what everybody is doing, because that's what we would do collectively together, being in a face-to-face. We also might need to talk to baby boomers about how often you need to have a Zoom meeting. Just having a Zoom meeting to get everybody together, it's a good idea once in a while, but it doesn't have to be an every Monday morning kind of thing, because that's where we might go to the extreme. Right? And that, by the way, will absolutely drive Gen X crazy. Gen X, as I mentioned, were latchkey kids. And what that meant was they were home by themselves. They had to learn how to work the first microwaves, discovered all by themselves. You don't put aluminum foil in a microwave, right? So they are independent problem solvers. And because of this, they are the generation who adapted the best to work from home, because many Gen Xers have said over time, I don't want to work in these cubicle environments where they lower the walls and everybody can see what's going on. Everybody walking around, that's distracting to me. Let me work by myself. Just like when I played the first video games, I'll push the reset button until I win. Leave me alone. Okay. So this is why Gen X actually adapted to work from home better than any others. Plus, again, if you think about phase of life, many Gen Xers have older children who might have been there but didn't need as much supervision or assistance as millennials with younger children. So they didn't necessarily have that kind of pressure either. One of the things that we know about Gen X is because they're capable of doing so many things at the same time. They are process oriented. They can do 5 things at the same time, juggle 5 plates at the same time, if you will. But they have always preferred concise communication. You get an email from a baby boomer, it will be paragraphs. You get an email from a Gen Xer, it will have bullet points in there. Okay, so the fact that now there's been a lot more dependence on technology to communicate because of working from home, that just fits within what a Gen Xer preferred all along anyway. But they are also the generation who's actually the most frustrated with inefficient procedures and technology. Having a Zoom meeting just to have a Zoom meeting, technology that doesn't do what it needs to do, will absolutely cause a Gen Xer to rethink their employment with the organization. Gen Xers have also been the first generation who mentioned work-life balance because they saw what baby boomers were doing and they didn't want any part of that total dedication. But that doesn't mean that Gen Xers don't care about their work. But it's created some return to work mindset. On-site return must have a specific objective, not just be there to be visible, to show that there's cars in the parking lot so that when people drive by the company, they know that the company is doing okay. That's a traditionalist mindset right there. No, and they expect individualized return policies, right? What works best? When do I come in? Look, Gen Xers get it about work, okay? They know it is a necessary evil in life, if you will. So they understand this. But blanket policies will drive this generation absolutely crazy because it doesn't make sense. And Generation X is all about efficiency. And so any policy that interrupts efficiency will be a downside to this generation. Okay. All right. Now, interestingly enough, that's very similar to the millennial category. The millennial category has been asking for flexibility for integrated work-life balance for some time. They are the ones who has been lobbying for work from home. But interestingly enough, they are the least satisfied. And why? Because they have young children at home while working. And often at home, they have insufficient office space to do it, and possibly even weren't given the type of technology they need. I mean, when we first started doing Zoom training and we were thinking, okay, people we'll send them the workbook materials and they can print it. And then it began to realize not everybody has a printer at home. Okay, so was the technology given to millennials? Plus, millennials have always been a team-oriented generation, and they're missing the fun and the collaborative office environment. So yeah, having a kind of a Friday afternoon happy hour Zoom call with everybody is okay with millennials. They don't want to do it every Friday, but once in a while, just to have that collaboration again would be appreciated. But one of the things that is burning out millennials, they have a desire to succeed. They are embarrassed by making mistakes. This is really a motivated generation, even though that's not the stereotype. But now work from home has created too much expectation of 24/7 connectedness to work. And that's something that every organization needs to take a look at in return to work policies. Are you actually stressing out this millennial category because you're saying, oh, they're the ones who are most connected 24/7 to technology? That doesn't mean they want to be interrupted in the middle of the night. This is a work-life balance generation, right? Remember, this generation wants to make a difference, okay? They want to make a difference in the world. So they want to return to workplaces where they can make that difference, but they are not returning to problematic cultures, right? You know, they're working from home, and if they were dealing with an aggressive coworker while they were on site, and now they haven't had to deal with that person, why would I want to go back into the office and work with that person again? And if that's what's going to be mandated, they're looking for another job. Because remember, millennials don't just change jobs, they are willing to totally change careers away from whatever was their major or their training if they weren't necessarily a college graduate. So they will not return to a problematic culture. So for any managers who have been ignoring people's impact on other people, you know, oh, I've got a salesperson that does great job with sales, but they're a nightmare for people to work with side by side. Sorry, salespeople out there, I didn't mean to pick on you. But if managers have not been addressing people's accountability for how they impact other people, millennials are not going to return to that culture. There's plenty of opportunity out there. And anything that looks like on-site busy work will be rejected. You mean you had me come back here just so that you can see me doing this? I have been completing tasks all along. Any questions pop up for millennials, Patrick?
Nope, not as of now.
Okay, all right. And then we have Generation Z. This is people born after 1996. Now we need to remember that these are digital natives. iPhones, were already there. Programming a computer to use it just doesn't make any sense. These are digital natives. But what does that mean about post-pandemic work for them? They entered the workforce in a digital realm. In other words, they probably applied online, had their interview over a Zoom call, and now are working remotely. All right. So everything about their work experience so far, for many of them, has been through technology, which means they expect their managers to be able to use the latest technology as well. So again, if we have some managers who don't understand that, what is the fastest way to chat with somebody? Is it texting, or is it some other app that Gen Z might be using that they find to be very helpful in having group discussions? We all better get on board and figure out what that is, or we're going to lose members of this generation. They also have not experienced in-person interactions with colleagues. And so they're missing out on the nuances of the culture. So if you're seeing word choice in emails, for example, and you're thinking, oh, nobody should be saying that. Well, texting is very upfront, it's very blunt. And so they haven't had in-person interactions yet. And as a result, feel less informed and connected to the team, to the manager, and even to the company itself. So what are we doing as an organization to help our newest to the workforce hires feel connected to us? And also understand that this is a generation who has the greatest concern for financial security. In 2008, they saw their parents get laid off. They might have even had to move in with their grandparents. um, a lot of the entry-level jobs were gig economy jobs for this generation that they lost when the lockdown occurred. What that means then is that the pandemic economy may delay their life and career progressions. There was a study by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York that said the first 10 years in the labor market shape a person's lifetime earning potential. And if Gen Z is remaining unemployed, they're they're lacking the ability to develop on-the-job skills. So once again, that recommendation to connect with high schools, to connect with universities, with trade schools, and provide apprenticeships and internships with this generation is important, because if they can't make it work in traditional work environments, they're going to turn to influencer careers, right? They're going to have their own TikTok videos and their YouTube channels. And there are examples of 14-year-olds who are worth $1 million because of their YouTube videos. So if that they are that motivated to be an influencer, isn't that a person you would want in your work environment? So is your work environment adapting to this generation? And this generation, even more than millennials, are concerned about society. Think about it. They have been affected by the pandemic. They have seen what has happened within society because of the pandemic. So even though they were already globally minded before all of this happened, they are certainly much more mindful of impact on society. What does your company make? What service does your organization provide? How does that affect people, people in their families? Do you talk about that, or do you just talk about, look, you need to put part A together with part B and get 100 of them made per hour? That is not going to resonate with this generation. So this is a very quick overview of what's usually like 8 hours worth of information here. So I'm hoping that you can see from all of this that every generation has had challenges during this pandemic. They're all really seeking individualized work from home versus on-site work policies. Okay, when do we need them there? When don't we need them there? And for what good reason? Not because we've always done it. That doesn't make any sense. And everybody really will need training in new advanced technologies, possibly even in conflict mediation, because of those who are perceiving a difference in the work from home people versus the on-site people. But we're always telling people, we want you to, did you talk to that person? We want you to work it out on your own. But are they trained in how to do that? And team accountability. They're out there. We can't necessarily see them working remotely. Do they understand what accountability is? It's not micromanaging. It's having impact on problems whenever you're affected by it, coming up with solutions whenever you see a problem and offering that to everybody. Actually, our youngest generations are probably better at that than than some of the previous generations because they've worked in teams for most of their school career. So do we have the technology available to make that sharing possible? So at this point, I'd like to ask, what questions do you have about anything we have discussed?
Okay, Deb, we have had a few come in. Let's see, the first one, how do you work, hold on. How do you work with Gen Z when they feel they know better than all other age groups?
Okay, great question. Gen Z does not define themselves as inexperienced. They define themselves as other experienced. And if you think about it, in many ways, they are. For those of us who may still be technologically challenged, we are inexperienced. They are the other experienced in that category. They have done a lot in their young lifetimes because their parents have made it possible. They want them to have every opportunity. They're overscheduled. They're playing soccer and in ballet and on the debate team. And I mean, they're doing so many things. So the expectation is they will be heard. What you want to do there, though, is have a one-on-one conversation about how they should present their ideas. Telling them, ask to hear the experience of other generations because that's what other generations um, were expected to do with their elders. So now that they are the elders, if you will, they expect to be heard. And that's something that Gen Z sometimes needs to be reminded of. It's really a coaching of how to have the conversation because the last thing we want to do is diminish their energy toward offering those ideas. We just need to shape how that is communicated.
Okay, next question. If you don't agree with a traditionalist or baby boomers work from home policy, should you confront them or quit? If confront them, how?
Okay. All right. Remember that especially traditionalists, but also baby boomers, got to remember baby boomers were mentored by traditionalists. Many baby boomers are more traditionally minded than they would like to admit. Okay. So it's all about the logic. They will say to you, look, if you're telling me about how hard things are at home, that's just whining. I'm sorry, that's so hard. Okay. And unfortunately, that's the perception. That's one of the stereotypes, especially of millennials. Oh, they're so touchy-feely. Even in their word choice, they say, I feel that. I mean, that's a very common phrase now. And sometimes traditionalists and millennial and baby boomers don't respond well to that. It's unfortunate. It's a stereotype in their head. So it's got to be the numbers. Show the productivity. Show the objectives that you have worked out. Show the processes that you have used to keep yourself productive, to be connected with other employees. Offer that you would be willing to share this and train other people on it. Take the time to do that. Most importantly, remember that that seniority mindset and that baby boomer mindset of, we've been around, we've been visible. Show how you have been visible to your teammates, how your accountability has been visible. It also, remember that when people are presented with an idea that they can't picture, they will reject it. And that's true of any generation. That's human, okay? So what are baby steps? Offer baby steps. Get them focused on doing instead of deciding, okay? One step at a time. What can we do to bring them around to what you would like? If you go in there acting like this is all or nothing, or I'm going to quit, you're probably going to be working on your resume, all right? Because that's just not the way traditionalists and baby boomers operate. So present the plan and then present baby steps to that plan. Get them starting to do something, to change something. Get them focused on the doing, not the deciding.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question.
Okay.
How do you feel about a team that has mixed requirements where some members must be on site due to job function, while others' job responsibilities may allow more flexibility and work from home?
Okay. You're going to have scorekeeping. People keep score. All right. They keep score over stupid stuff, like who has the desk share with arms. Okay. So the perception is going to be who's working harder. And that's why some of those systems that are out there that you can put in place to make it very transparent what people are doing and how they are accomplishing it. Allow people to talk through those challenges. Have a Friday afternoon happy hour, and mandate that it's non-alcoholic if that is what your policy needs to be. But say, let's get together and talk about what are some of the challenges, and have the people from home talk about, this is what I miss about being in the office. This is what you are able to do that I'm not, so that the two sides of the fence are painting a picture of the reality instead of the grass looking greener on the other side of the fence, if you will permit that analogy. But that's what it is right now. It's scorekeeping. So we need to continue to talk about who's doing what and by when, and that those accountabilities are being met to reduce the scorekeeping. Please notice I said reduce. Human beings are scorekeeper. We'll never get rid of it completely.
Great. Okay, well, that does conclude our time together. We would like to thank you for attending and encourage you to register now for Deborah's full program, which will be delivered on Thursday and Friday, March 24th and 25th. It should be 2022, and it will be live via Zoom. You can register at the link that you see on your screen. You can also contact us about all of our other offerings at 330-672-3416 or at your training partner at kent.edu. We can bring all of our programs to your organization, and you can join our extensive list of clients and bring Kent State to your organization. We again like to thank you for attending and encourage you to register for our next webinar, which will be on Friday, January 21st, 2022 at 11 a.m., which will be Making Great Decisions with Kent State Facilitator Bob Jewell. Registration will open soon at the website that you see on your screen. On behalf of Kent State University's Center for Corporate and Professional Development and your presenter, Deborah Easton, thank you for attending today and have a great weekend.